Hello guys and welcome back to the F1 Tube YouTube channel, and in today's video I will be kickstarting my mid-season reviews. This will be the first of 3 mid-season reviews, and I'll be starting from the bottom of the table, the constructors table, and working my way up to the top. I will be reviewing each team's and drivers' 2019 seasons so far. So let's start off with Williams. And well, what can you say? They have just been dire. The reliability they have got spot on, but the pace of that car is nothing short of catastrophic. And somehow Paddy Lowe, who did leave the team before the Australian Grand Prix, designed a worse car than 2018. How is that possible? Also, Williams almost missed half of the first pre-season test at Barcelona, really illustrating the fact that there is definitely a management problem at the team. But going back to the car, it has received upgrades in the last few races, which is good to see and will hopefully impulse Williams to better results for the rest of 2019. Williams' best race of the season has to be the German Grand Prix, because it was the only point they have scored so far this season, courtesy of Robert Kubica, with George Russell right behind him. And that was the story of the German Grand Prix. You had to keep your nose clean and you had to get your reliability on point. And that is exactly what Williams did. And they got a long-awaited points finish. Although it is fiendishly difficult to pick out one, Williams' worst race of 2019 so far for me has to be the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, due to George Russell running over a drain cover on the Friday and destroying his chassis in the process. And then the following day in qualifying 1, Robert Kubica crashed heavily, destroying his car and requiring Williams to give up spare parts, which they really cannot afford to do in this crisis that they are enduring. Williams' torrid 2019 venture is evident through these stats. They have 1 point to their name, 1 points finish, courtesy obviously of Robert Kubica in Germany, and they are plumb last in the standings, a long way off the rest of the field. Although he has been miles off his teammates' pace, Robert Kubica obviously is carrying that solitary point that Williams holds in 2019 so far at the German Grand Prix. Obviously it was due to post-race penalties for the Alfa Romeos, but it's a point nonetheless, and it was Robert Kubica's experience that helped him get that point. He made no mistakes the entire Grand Prix, and yeah, he got that point. But apart from that, he's had a really underwhelming 2019 season, been nowhere near his teammates' pace. And as much as I do respect Robert Kubica and I love him to bits, and you know, he's an inspiration to me after that amazing comeback he made after that horrible rally crash in 2011, he really just has not been up to scratch with the Formula 1 field. Maybe it's due to how monstrous these modern day Formula 1 cars are, but he just has not been there. But at least for him, he has that point, and hopefully that will boost his confidence for the rest of 2019, and hopefully he can take the fight to George Russell for the rest of the season. Kubica's best race was obviously Germany for reasons I've previously mentioned, and for his worst race, well, for both of the Williams drivers, I'm not going to be doing a worse race because it's just too tough on them, but I am going to say Robert Kubica has had too many races where he's just nowhere near his teammates, and at times looks vulnerable to going a lap down to his teammates. Now moving on to George Russell, who has really been driving the wheels off of that Williams car the entire season, out-qualifying his teammates at each of the 2019 races so far, and out-racing his teammates at all but 2 Grand Prix of the 2019 season so far. Although he is the only pointless driver so far in 2019, he is gaining that experience, which is pivotal in your rookie season and will be pivotal moving forwards in hopefully an illustrious Formula 1 career for the Brit. His best race of 2019 for me was the most recent one at the Hungaroring, where he almost got out of Q1 in a Williams car, which was still dire. He out-qualified his teammate by 1.6 seconds. Amazing qualifying performance there from Russell. And also, he finished P16 in the race, comfortably defeating his teammates, and for this team 2020 cannot come soon enough. Now moving on to Haas, who have also endured a turbulent 2019 season. Their qualifying pace, by the way, absolutely mesmerising, but in terms of endurance, they're lacking a lot. Combine that with the rich energy, let's say shenanigans, and also some driver friction within the team, people do suggest, or driver collisions. It just has not been a satisfactory season for the American outfit. Furthermore, both drivers have separate cars. Grosjean now has the Australia spec and K-Mag has the most recent spec, so the next few races for Haas will be about investigating where they're going right and wrong, but ultimately I think it's the tyres which is Haas's, let's say, Achilles heel, as they really struggle to operate them. Haas's best race of the season so far for me has to be the Australian Grand Prix, because in both qualifying and the race the Haas car was easily the best in the midfield. Also, the drivers weren't coming to blows, which is good for, let's say, a team point of view. And although Romain Grosjean did retire from the race, I think in terms of promise, this was Haas's best race by a mile in 2019. But their worst race for me has to be the British Grand Prix, because after the controversial Rich Energy saga and after a dismal qualifying, the drivers came to blows on lap 1, giving themselves punctures and ruining their races on the first lap, really infuriating team principal Gunther Steiner. In 2019 so far, Haas have 26 points with 6 points finishes, a best finish of 6th place with K-Mag in Australia, and they lie 9th in the Constructors' standings. For the majority of the season, Kevin Magnussen has just had the measure of Romain Grosjean. Use qualifying as an example, especially the Austrian Grand Prix qualifying, where he sensationally put his Haas car 5th on the grid. K-Mag, yeah, in terms of qualifying, has been absolutely brilliant. Of course, the Haas doesn't work at its best during the Grand Prix, but he's still trying to maximise the best out of his car and has still just been better than his teammate. K-Mag's best race for me has to be Australia. I don't really need to explain why, in my opinion. And his worst race for me, it's the Canadian Grand Prix. He crashed in Q2. They had to change his chassis and he just didn't go anywhere during the Grand Prix. Romain Grosjean hasn't had the luxury of luck, I'd say, in 2019, but when the luck has been on his side, he hasn't really stood up to himself and has really struggled. He has been, I think, destroyed by Kevin Magnussen too many times in 2019. But at times he's also shown that he does deserve to be on the grid, with also very good qualifying performances like at the German Grand Prix and also at the Australian Grand Prix in both races where he outqualified his teammates. Also, Gro has also shown his ability to try and develop a car, obviously through his own instinct, going back to the Australian spec Haas car, which takes a lot of guts in a team where there is not a lot of transparency. His best race in my eyes was the German Grand Prix, where he qualified P6, finished P7 and had the measure of his teammate the whole way through. His worst race, the French Grand Prix, knocked out in Q1 and again went nowhere in the Grand Prix. For Racing Points so far, it has been a season of transition in name and philosophy of running a Formula 1 team, with Lawrence Stroll leading a new consortium which basically just controls the Racing Points Formula 1 team. They have hit some highs, but for the majority of the time they have just been around the midfield and sometimes actually at the tail end of the midfield. But of course they brought a raft of updates recently to their car which could head a new run and string of promising results to the end of 2019. The team's best race of 2019 in my opinion has to be the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, with Sergio Perez qualifying P5, finishing P6 and Lance Stroll finishing P9, showing what brilliant pace that car had around the Baku City Street circuit that weekend. Their worst race came a race after Baku, the Spanish Grand Prix, where that car had absolutely no pace, and Lance Stroll crashed out whilst battling with Lando Norris in the middle parts of the Grand Prix. Racing Points have collected 31 points this season courtesy of 7 points finishes. Their season high of a race result came with Lance Stroll at the German Grand Prix with 4th place, and obviously they sit in 8th place in the standings. Out of the 2 Racing Point drivers, Sergio Perez has undoubtedly been the quicker and better driver in my opinion in 2019, out-qualifying his teammate Lance Stroll at every single race. And yeah, apart from the German Grand Prix, the points tally will show that Perez has had the measure of his Canadian teammate. But as a counter-argument, Sergio was the one that made the mistake at the German Grand Prix, but Sergio's best race of 2019 so far for me has to be the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Qualified 5th, got ahead of Max Verstappen at the start, and ultimately finished P6 and bested the rest. And the Mexican's worst race of the season for me has to be the German Grand Prix, where he crashed out early on. Now, Lance Stroll. Now, despite being an inferior driver to Sergio Perez in 2019, the Canadian somehow finds himself ahead of Perez in the standings. His qualifying pace, Lance Stroll, has been dreadful. I know I have battered him a lot in 2019 in terms of his qualifying pace, but in my opinion that is justified. Only getting out of Q1 in one of the 12 races in 2019, come on, that is not good enough at all. But on the flip side, Lance makes it work during the Grand Prix. His pace, his tyre management during the Grand Prix, in my opinion, is brilliant right now and is definitely at least on a par with his teammates. Lance's best race of 2019 for me is the Canadian Grand Prix, his home race. He started P18, brilliant first stint pace, went long, then went on to the softer compound of tyres, and his racecraft was supreme enough to get him into the points, a well-deserved P9 that day. Now, I know people are going to say his best race was the German Grand Prix, but for me, that was just his team taking a gamble and it worked out. I don't think Lance impulsed that decision or aided that decision. I just think he benefited off of it, and I think his Canadian Grand Prix drive was a lot more worthy of a great performance in my opinion. I'm not saying he was dreadful at the German Grand Prix, he did really well, but he worked for that Canadian Grand Prix points finish. His worst race of 2019, the most recent race, the Hungarian Grand Prix, although he was blocked by Antonio Giovinazzi in Q1, which did leave him in a pretty, let's say, underwhelming place. He was outraced by a Williams, enough said. But guys, that is it for today's video. Please like this video, comment down below what you thought of my reviews of Racing Point, Haas and Williams and their drivers for the 2019 season so far, and please subscribe to the F1 Tube YouTube channel. Now guys, I'm going to leave this up to you. Would you like to see me do an F1 2019 career mode on this YouTube channel? Please let me know down in the comments. That would be much appreciated because I want to make content that you guys would be satisfied with. But I'll leave that with you guys. But until next time guys, see you later.